Right. So today we'll be covering part one of forensics for Linux in this block. But before I start, I want to make the point that you should always use forensics first when beginning a new, opening up a new VM. This is because oftentimes, like the answers to your forensics questions, so if you're looking for a specific file or specific process, these might be like terminated or deleted or just like misplaced as you progress through the round. So definitely do forensics first. All right, with that out of the way, let's move to our first topic, hashing. So hashes are typically used, hashes are like a form of one-way encryption. So this is typically for encryption only, so you can't decrypt. So if you have to store any sensitive info, maybe like something like passwords, that would usually be in a hash. So we'll be taking a look at MD5. So this uses a type of hash called checksums, which verifies the integrity of files. So this just makes sure that your file hasn't been tampered with and that you're getting the correct file. So if we take a look on our virtual machine, it's kind of slow today. Okay. So the command is md5 sum, and then the arguments is the file you want to verify, md5 sum. And so just look at my directory first. Okay, so I want to verify the file.txt file on my system. So the command is md5 sum. And the argument is the file you want to get the checksum of, file.txt. So as you can see, we generate a string of characters. So that's essentially our checksum. So if we wanted to verify this, so if we wanted to verify file.txt for its integrity later on, we would export this string into a separate file. Give it a minute. Okay. So if I wanted to export my checksum into c.md5, I would use this file to then verify the signature. So same command, just the -c argument, c.md5. Okay, so this tells me that the file is okay and everything's as it should be. So let's now take a look at some encryption algorithms that we can decrypt. So ROP13 is the first one. Calling it encryption is a little generous though. It essentially shifts each character in a string forward 13 times. So what that means is that if we were to use this website and I were to put the string world, it shifts each character forward 13 characters. So H shifts forward to U, E to R, and so on and so forth. To decrypt it, you have to shift the encrypted string forward another 13 times. So U shifted forward 13 times H, R is E, and so on and so forth. So you might notice that this isn't the most secure. It's not very secure at all. So this is typically strictly for like, I guess, display or like you wouldn't use this to encrypt your passwords. So if you wanted to do this in Linux on our system, I'll do this on our system. Okay, so I'll put the string I want to encrypt. So This is my bit string. Heads up, this should stand for Cyber Patriots, unless I spelled something wrong. And I would use the tr command to shift everything forward 13 by 13 characters. Yeah, I'm just putting up, telling the computer how to shift the string. It seems to be taking a long time to do. Wait, I had a typo. Need a space in the middle. Middle. Okay, there. All right, that was fun. So I shifted the encrypted string forward 13 by 13 characters, and we get Cyber Patriots. If I want to decrypt this, I would do the exact same thing. If I want to encrypt this, I would put this string in my echo instead. So that's it for route 13. It essentially shifts your entire string by 13 characters. Not the most secure thing. Something a little more secure is base 64. So base 64, like route 13, can be encrypted and decrypted. You would typically use this for transferring files containing binary data or special characters without them being jumbled between mediums. So this is just to make sure that when you're transferring files, nothing gets corrupted. So if you wanted to encrypt something in base 64, we could once again use an online tool. So if I wanted to encode something in base 64, world, encode it, and you get this string. So you might notice this equal signs over here. This is non-essential to the rest of the string. So you can consider this as padding. If you were to delete this, nothing would happen. It's just a good way of, I guess, checking that this is indeed a base 64 string. I want to decode it with the equal signs included. I will just paste that back here and decode. So I get hello world returned. So once again, with base 64, you can encrypt and decrypt strings and files. So if I wanted to encrypt a string in base 64, it's a lot easier than route 13. My system feels like loading. Okay. So I'll put string one encrypt. In this case, Cyber Patriots once again. Cyber Patriot. Base 64. I'll have a pipeline in base 64. And I just realized I had it in all caps. Pretty nice keyboard on my computer. It's a bit cool. Okay, let's terminate this. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, slightly cool down computer. So if I wanted to encrypt Cyber Patriot string, put the pipeline base 64, and we get our encrypted string successfully this time. So again, you'll notice that we have the two equal signs at the bottom, at the end. You can ignore this, or you don't have to. Again, it's padding. All right, so if I wanted to decode this, I would copy the encrypted string. So let's get my echo command. Paste the string. Okay. String base64, and then dash decode decoded. And I have a successfully decoded string. So again, base64 and ROT13 can be encrypted and decrypted. For forensics questions, they might ask you to paste a decrypted or encrypted string. So typically you might rely on an online tool. I just showed how to do the terminal just because. So moving on to the next type of question, our next subject are processes. So typically you might be asked what process ID is associated with what process, or what command is running what process. So for general process information, we use a PS command. So if I were to run PS on its own, I would not get that much information. Not much. It returns my PS command itself with process ID 226 and bash. So not too much information. So for your arguments with PS, there are a couple of ways to put them. So there's the BSD format, which does not require a dash, and the typical Unix format, which does require a dash. So I'll show BSD first. For BSD, again, you do not need a dash for the arguments. Okay, so the arguments I put are AUX. A stands for all users. U is to present my information in user-readable format, and X lists processes that don't control the terminal. So this includes processes running in the background. So if I were to run this, I would get quite a bit more information. So let's break this down. Scroll all the way to the top. Okay. So we have the user, which is the user running the process. So a lot of them are root, or archon, the only user on my system. PID is the process ID. Percentage CPU is a percentage CPU used by the process. A lot of these processes aren't on right now, so that's why it's 0. Ooh, that was weird. Okay. Percentage memory. VSZ represents virtual memory in kilobytes. RSS is physical memory size. Start is the start time of the process, and stat is the state. It's kind of the state of the process. So SS or S is sleep, R is running, Z is zombie. If you do have it in categories. Okay, so that's the type of information we can get with the BSD arguments. We can also use the Unix formatted arguments, which is very similar information, not too different. Hash E is all processes, and F is just to format it nicely. So you'll notice that's very similar. On the left, we have the UID, which is essentially the user running the process. We have I believe it's the process, or I believe it's the PPID, or the parent process ID, which essentially if a process spawns another process, the parent process is displayed. Oh, that's displayed second. The process ID, which is displayed first, again, is an ID associated with the process. We have the start time and the command itself. So again, very similar information between -EF and AUX. If I wanted to search for, there's a couple ways to search for specific processes. So if you wanted to search for them by, scroll back down to my terminal and wait for it to load. Okay, so as I was saying, there's a couple ways to search for processes. If I wanted to search, grep is one way, but as you'll see in a bit, isn't the most refined way of doing this. So I want to search for my processes, or no AUX. I'm using the AUX set of arguments. PS. So if I want to see only get all processes run by root, I would use grep root. So as you can see, these are my root processes. If you scroll up, you might notice that not all these are by the user root, as this just contains a root string within its output. This technically wasn't actually by root itself. So for a more refined search of strictly okay. So for a more refined search of just strictly processes created by a specific user, so in our case search, we could use ps-f-u for user, and then our user. These are strictly all processes by the root user. This is in the Unix formatted. This is in the Unix format as opposed to BSD. If I wanted to search for specific commands, so all processes associated with a specific command, I would use a -c argument. We only have one associated process ID 485. We could also use pgrep to search for, I believe, specific PIDs. So 485. Pgrep, not pgrep. Yeah, or pgrep for, pgrep for specific commands. There's a process ID 485. So we use PS for general process information. NetStat gives us a little more information regarding ports and networking. So sometimes NetStat isn't installed on your system, so you usually want to sudo apt install that. I did that ahead of time since I'm having tech issues. So the NetStat command running by itself returns quite a bit of information. So I want to filter this out a bit. So to do so, first, my set of arguments are -a for all, -t for TCP ports, -u for UDP ports, -p to return my process ID, and option -l for strictly listening ports. I'm going to leave that out for now, though. I think all of my ports are listening, though. I don't have anything established yet. Yeah. Okay, so let's break this output down a bit. Okay. So let's break down this output. So when we see the local address, when it denotes localhost, that means it's a loopback address. So this information from the port is not connected to the outside. It's strictly on our system. Anything with 0.0.0.0 is connected to the outside world. So be careful with those. The states are typically listening or established. An established connection is an established connection, hence the name. So if I want to get all my addresses in numeric format, I would add the n arguments. So that essentially just converts all of my addresses into a numeric format. So that's it for NetStat. Oh, one more thing. Colon and then a number denotes the port number. So in this case, this process is running on port 53. So that's a useful bit of information regarding NetStat. If I wanted to only get my listening ports or everything under the state listening, as shown here, I'll put the L argument. Yeah, so it didn't really filter much out since everything's already listening on my system. But typically, if you have established networks, it would filter those out. So if I wanted to, in which case, filter out specific I wanted to search for a specific port. I'll use grep once again. Grep colon and the port number. So port 53. Password. Yeah, so there aren't any port numbers under 53. Let's get with 61. Okay, yeah. So there are ports of 53. I just put the right arguments. So yeah, this searches for the port number 53. So we have a couple of we have one UDP port and one TCP connection. So yeah. So that's it for processes of NetStat and PS. Moving on our Linux system storage. But before I go into like the specifics, we'll cover searching for files. This is a really common forensics question. Oh, where is, let's say, a specific video or media file located for a certain user? So this is really common in the beginning rounds. So typically, you could open up the file manager, but that's a little slow since you'd have to go through the whole graphic interface. A faster way of doing so is by searching by the extension. So you'd use the find command to search the entire system. So let me just type up the entire command. Okay, so while that loads, I'll explain the actual command itself. So we're using the find command to search the entire system. So that's why I have / denoting the root directory, so the entire system, of the name of the, this is the string I want all my located files to contain. So once that loads, it should say *.mp3. So this essentially means any files with the .mp3 extension show up. Yeah, again, this is searching my entire system for .mp3 files, which are typically video files. So yeah, it found one MP3 file in my documents folder. So if this were a forensic question, if we're asking where video.mp3 was located, I would just copy and paste this path into the question. So it doesn't just have to be file extensions. It could be small fragments of the file name. For example, if I wanted to search for, let's say, all files with the string file, like the actual string file itself within it, I do asterisk and then the string I'm searching for file, and then another asterisk. And then there's a ton of files with the name file on my system, so I'm just going to search for my home directory. Yeah, so it's quite a few. This is the one I was looking for. If I want a more refined search, I would delete the asterisk in the front. So yeah, .txt. So use the find command to search for files on your system. These are typically media files. Okay, now to go a little deeper into the Linux system storage. So first is disk free. So the amount of free disk space you have on your system. This is with the df command, short for disk free. It's hard to run df by itself. Quite a bit of information, not all of which makes sense. -h argument for human readable format. That just makes everything a little more concise. So let's break down what I'm looking at. On the left, I have my file system. File systems. These are the names of each particular drive. So this includes physical hard drives, partition drives, virtual drives. This is the size of the file in megabytes, gigabytes, so on and so forth. This is the amount used. So size is the amount, just the total amount. Used is the amount I've used. Available is the amount available. So it mounted on just the mount points or the location. of the file system. So that's a brief overview of disk free. So if you want to examine the disk usage, so that kind of breaks down disk usage across specific directories. We would use the du command, again, short for disk usage. So I'll be using the human readable command again, just to keep it pretty. U-H. So what this does is it takes a look at my current directory and breaks down the free disk space for all of my subdirectories. So if I wanted a bit more information, so for my entire system, I would denote the root directory, and I get quite a bit more information. So yeah, so this is a lot of info. If I wanted a more narrowed down search, if I want a more narrowed down search instead of just a /, I'll put the path. So for example, slash home for my home directory. So yeah, once this terminates, I'll be showing you how to sort the sort largest to smallest directories in your system. While that goes, I'll just show it visually. Okay, we'd use du-a, so du for all, pipeline sort-n-r head-n10. So 10 is essentially the top 10 biggest files on my system. Again, if I wanted to narrow down to just a user, I would do /home/ the name of my user. So yeah, that's it for disk usage. This is still going on. Okay, so now we can get, if you remember, df, one of the outputs of df was file systems and like partitioned and partitions. So df, fdisk or format disk for short, takes a deeper look at those. So with fdisk, okay, back to normal. Okay, so with fdisk, we can typically manipulate partitions on our Linux hard drive easily, or just access the data related to a file. So for the scope of Cyber Patriots, I don't think they usually won't ask you to create a partition or delete a partition. So we'll be using fdisk to just get info about each partition. So fdisk-l, short for list. So fdisk list. Okay. Once I hit enter, I'll get a list of all my disk partitions. Oh shit, I'm supposed to be in sudo for this. Okay, so I've been using the word partition a lot. Partition is essentially storage split into large isolated sections, and each of those sections are called a partition. You can think of each of those partitions as isolated hard drives in a sense. So yeah, if I scroll up, I'll get a nice formatted table. So this is the only drive, this is the only partition I have. It's under /dev. So everything under /dev is considered a driver or a drive. So drives come in two types. So there's typically block drives and character drives. So block drives are usually they store data. So for example, a external hard drive would be considered a block drive. Character drives transfer data, so a mouse, an external mouse, or maybe an external printer would be considered a character drive. So those would be under /dev. And so if I had a external mouse plugged into my system, it would be the amount of space for it would be displayed here. Okay. So you might also notice the word sector. So sectors are kind of how Linux partitions or how Linux formats its data. So each sector, kind of like a group of sectors, forms a block. And again, a block is a partition split into smaller sectors. So you can kind of see a hierarchy forming here. So a group of sectors is a block. So in the past, blocks were usually, I think, 512 bytes large. These days, you can get blocks are typically different sizes. Some drives don't even use blocks. Most do, though. So a standard typical block would usually be 1024 bytes. But again, those can vary. So that's fdisk. If I wanted to get more detailed information on a specific drive, on a specific partition, I just put the partition name, so /dev SDA. And I can sudo for this. Yeah. So the device name, the sectors. So remember how a bunch of sectors form blocks. The size 10 gigabytes, and the type Linux. So this is kind of the outside of the scope of forensics, but typically if you wanted to, you would usually use fdisk to delete or format partitions. So I'll just show that briefly. And have to be in sudo once again. Yeah, so over here in this area, I can do a couple of things. I can delete this partition, which would be very, very bad. Do not do that. I can toggle to a different bootable. I can, there's just different arguments you can put here. So WT. Again, this is outside the scope of Cyber Patriots, but this is typically what you would normally be using fdisk for. So formatting a specific partition. So yeah. I believe that is the end of storage. And those are the key forensics topics. Are there any questions regarding like processes, regarding storage, or regarding encryption or decryption? Also, sorry about my laptop. Looks like it's been having a very bad day.